He wasn't unattractive, nor poor, nor lacking in life experience. But on his first date with a woman nearly 20 years younger, the only thing that lingered was an awkward silence and a sense of misalignment. She left with a polite handshake. He was left with the familiar question, "What did I do wrong?" We often think age is the barrier, but the truth lies elsewhere. What turns young women off from older men isn't age itself. It's the loss of self-possession. They've grown disconnected from their strength, their presence, and their inner steadiness, qualities that were once their greatest assets. There's a paradox. The more we try to please, the more we try to prove we're worthy, the more we erode the natural magnetism we once carried. And what's even more dangerous, we forget how to live as true men. In this video, we'll uncover 7 seemingly minor habits that quietly repel young women, and more seriously, draw us further from the powerful core within. Don't view this as a dating manual. Take it as a wake-up call. From this moment forward, let us begin the journey of reclaiming our lives with a Stoic spirit, not chasing approval, but living by inner virtue. 1. Idolizing her. When you place someone on a pedestal, you lower yourself. One of the most common mistakes older men make when approaching younger women is unconsciously turning her into a destination, a target to pursue, impress, and claim. This approach may seem harmless, but in truth, it signals an inner imbalance and distorts the very motive behind the interaction. The moment you enter a conversation with the mindset of, "How can I get her to like me?" you've already placed yourself beneath her. You cease to be someone sharing. You become someone pleading. Every word, gesture, and action becomes governed by the fear of rejection. As a result, you stop being natural, stop being real. You become a version of yourself, trying to meet a standard, afraid to show your truth. The belief that I must win her over brings with it a cascade of harmful psychological effects. It creates internal pressure, forcing you to constantly recalibrate your words, hunt for positive feedback, and obsess over every detail of communication. You stop caring whether the conversation is meaningful and focus solely on whether it's working. This disconnection is subtle but deeply felt by the other person. Young women, consciously or not, can sense when a man is not showing up as himself, but performing a version engineered for approval. They feel themselves being placed on an unrealistic pedestal, not seen as a person, but as a prize. This not only places pressure on them, but also severs any authentic connection. They don't see a man. They see someone striving to be liked. Stoic philosophy, which emphasizes rational living, emotional self-mastery, and action guided by principle rather than outcome, is the opposite of the approval-seeking conquest mindset. In Stoicism, we act rightly not to be affirmed, but because it is right. Entering a relationship or conversation, then, should come from a desire to understand, to share, to be fully present, not to win or be validated. A man who truly understands his worth does not need to be chosen. He doesn't contort himself to become someone who fits. He simply is, clear, calm, and equal in all his relationships. Equality here is not about age, status, or achievement, but about this: two human beings of value, autonomy, and independent thought, capable of real connection, if neither is trying to impress. To approach a woman as a person, not a target, creates space for another kind of connection, real, unguarded, unscripted. When you speak to her as you would anyone else, with no hidden aim, no performance, no defense, that is when your most powerful magnetism appears, the energy of presence. And when you're present with a heart, unafraid of rejection, and unneeding of approval. You no longer crave a specific outcome. You are free. And freedom is a form of attraction no social trick can replicate. She will feel your groundedness, not through polished words, but through the alignment of your voice, your gaze, and your presence. You no longer chase attention. You become the calm center in a chaotic, performative world. And that is the root of enduring attraction. When a man places a young woman on too high a pedestal in his mind, he not only reshapes how he sees himself, but he unconsciously alters the entire dynamic between them. Idealizing her, whether for her looks, youth, freshness, or any trait, means she is no longer seen as a full human being, but as a projected ideal, sculpted from the man's own expectations. This idealization leads to many communication breakdowns. First, the man becomes gripped by subtle but powerful fears. Fear of saying the wrong thing, fear of disappointing her, fear of losing the opportunity. These fears steer him away from authenticity and into calculation, tailoring every word to maintain the image he's built around this idol. Every action, instead of arising from truth, is shaped to protect the illusion he's created of the woman before him. More importantly, when someone is placed too high, they too feel the pressure to maintain the fantasy that's been constructed. The young woman, in this case, no longer feels free to be herself. She censors her words and actions, acutely aware of the expectations projected onto her. She cannot show her ordinary, imperfect sides because someone has cast her in a role of perfection. This lack of naturalness dissolves true connection. One person is inhibited by fear of losing approval, the other bound by the burden of being the muse, the special one, the extraordinary being. In such a space, the relationship does not grow through mutual understanding and acceptance, but rests on a fragile scaffolding of imagined ideals, easily shattered by the reality of everyday life. From a Stoic perspective, this violates a core principle of how we ought to see one another, as equals, sharing rational nature, wrestling with emotion, and striving to act virtuously. Stoicism urges us to avoid overexcitement and fantasy projections, for they unbalance the mind and draw us away from what is real. When a man sees the woman before him as a human, not an ideal, not a trophy, not a symbol, that's when true interaction begins. They can speak of fears, beliefs, small joys, and unfinished struggles without fear of judgment, without masks. Authenticity arises only when no one is playing a part, and real attraction only grows when people show up honestly in the relationship, not to make someone feel special, but because they are already special by being themselves. Placing someone too high not only keeps you down, it burdens them with a role that leaves no room for truth, intimacy, empathy, connection. None of these can survive under such pressure. A relationship should not be a stage. It should be a place where both people can drop their armor, release their expectations, and face one another as they truly are, whole, imperfect, but real. When you stop placing others above you, you not only free yourself from anxiety and insecurity, you offer them the rare freedom to be themselves. And it is in that freedom that real attraction is born, quiet, lasting, and effortless. 2. Ashamed of your age. Age is not a burden, unless you make it a chain. In conversations between older men and younger women, one of the simplest yet most revealing moments is when she asks, "How old are you?" Often it's an innocent question, free of judgment, yet it makes many men uncomfortable. Their reaction says more than the number itself, and it is this reaction, not the age, that shapes how they are perceived. The common responses are awkward smiles, evasions, or worse, rushing to justify their relevance by claiming they still work out, keep up with the young, or cracking jokes to soften the moment. But these reactions share a single message: that age is a liability, something to hide, minimize, or defend against. This mindset doesn't just create internal pressure, it subtly invites the woman to view age through a negative lens, even if she hadn't considered it a problem. By signaling insecurity around their age, men surrender control of the interaction and teach the other person to see their age as an issue. In effect, they instruct her to scrutinize what was once irrelevant. In human behavior, reactions speak louder than words. A calm, grounded "I'm 47," said with quiet confidence, stirs no discomfort. But the same words, paired with shifty eyes or hesitant tone, trigger a shift. He's clearly uneasy about this. From there, the natural flow of the connection changes toward caution, comparison, and doubt. At its core, shame about age reveals dependence on others' perceptions. It shows a man measuring his worth by external standards rather than inner clarity. This runs counter to Stoicism, which teaches emotional self-governance and the clear distinction between what we control and what we do not. Age, like the weather or death, lies beyond our control. According to Stoic teaching, the proper response to such realities is not passive acceptance, but conscious embrace. We don't just acknowledge our age, we honor it as part of the path, a vessel of lessons, experience, and personal evolution. Conversely, when a man lets age become a source of anxiety, he shifts into a passive stance. He behaves as if something about him needs to be forgiven or compensated for, and that drains his personal energy, the very force that others sense more deeply than anything he says or does. Women may not care how old you are, but they care deeply how you feel about your age. A confident 50-year-old can be far more compelling than a restless, approval-seeking 35-year-old. Because true confidence doesn't come from youth. It comes from living aligned with your nature, without apology, exaggeration, or self-minimization. So rather than avoid the topic of age, the wiser path is to own it. When you state your age openly, without defense or defiance, you declare, "I don't need permission. I am enough." In a competitive world, that kind of presence becomes a quiet force no seduction technique can imitate. Age, in its essence, is not just the accumulation of biological time. It is the imprint of lived experience, the record of what one has seen, endured, and understood. But in a culture that idolizes youth and equates it with desirability, many older men begin to see their age as a flaw to conceal or disguise. To reject one's age, consciously or not, is to reject the very value earned through maturity. When a man tries to appear younger, through clothing, speech, behavior, or attitude, he is, in effect, denying his current stage of life. This undermines his authenticity and fractures the connection between who he is and the persona he tries to project. The inconsistency may not be visible, but it is felt in a subtle, off-kilter energy. Denying age also means forfeiting its inherent advantages. Men in their 40s, 50s, and beyond possess qualities youth has yet to cultivate: steadiness in adversity, depth of insight, emotional regulation under stress, and a panoramic view of life and relationships. These are the roots of depth, something no appearance or clever line can substitute. In rejecting their age, men unknowingly reject these virtues as well. Through the Stoic lens, age is never a weakness. It is a natural necessity, a process we cannot control, and therefore must accept with calm respect. The Stoic learns to separate the controllable from the uncontrollable. Age belongs to the latter. What matters is not how young you look, but how you act, think, and respond through each phase of life. Accepting one's age does not imply resignation or stagnation. On the contrary, it allows one to live fully in the present, without longing for the past or fearing the future. A man who embraces his age, not just in words, but in attitude, emits a powerful signal: stability. And that kind of grounding is often what younger women, navigating a turbulent world, find most magnetic. In contrast, a man who clings to a younger self-image and resists his years loses not just authenticity, but depth. For depth does not come from resembling the young, but from being a mature, steady, and self-defined presence. Moreover, to wear one's age with dignity creates a kind of soft power, silent, unforced, yet unmistakable. A man with inner authority doesn't need to speak it. His congruence between what's inside and what shows is persuasion enough. To reject your age is to discard the foundation time has built: clarity, restraint, confidence untethered from compliments or stares. And in losing that connection, a man forfeits not only his appeal, but his most essential relationship, the one with himself. 3. Leading with money. If wealth is the first thing you show, don't be surprised when it's the only thing they see. In relationships between older men and younger women, using money as a means to impress is a common tactic. It might appear as flaunting a car, talking up a high-paying job, funding lavish dates, or offering expensive gifts early on. Outwardly, this seems like generosity or financial strength, but underneath lies a different motive, a desire to quickly capture attention, admiration, or the feeling of being chosen. But when a man leads with money, he reduces himself not to a multidimensional individual, but to an exchangeable asset, a product in the marketplace. Money no longer supports the relationship. It becomes its foundation. As a result, the relationship is evaluated and shaped by the financial image he projects, not by his character, presence, or principles. Psychologically, this behavior often stems from insecurity in non-material aspects of self. A man may feel his experience, voice, or way of being lacks appeal compared to younger men, so he highlights the most visible strength: money. In doing so, wealth becomes a safe weapon to control the dating dynamic. Yet the very weapon undermines deeper connection. Because when a woman perceives that money is the main currency, she calibrates her behavior accordingly. Connection no longer forms around emotion, personality, or shared values, but around expectation, enjoyment, and silent comparison with other financial offers. Both sides lose the chance to truly know each other. The man cannot tell if she's drawn to who he is, or just what he brings. The woman doesn't know if there's space for her real self, or if she's just a recipient of resources. From a Stoic standpoint, this reveals a misalignment in the hierarchy of values. Money is an indifferent, neither good nor bad, merely a neutral tool. What matters is not how much one has, but how one relates to it. If money is used to influence emotion, mask rejection fears, or hoard dominance, then it is no longer a tool. It becomes a master. And to the Stoic, dependence is the death of inner freedom. A man who leads with money places himself in a position to be judged and creates pressure to maintain a high standard, leaving the relationship fragile, vulnerable, to collapse the moment wealth ceases to impress. This pressure breeds silent tension. He never knows if he can rest or must keep spending, displaying, gifting to hold her attention. In contrast, a man who begins with confidence, calm, purpose, and presence builds on a firmer foundation. His financial standing is then seen as a natural extension, not as leverage. Ultimately, the true value in a relationship isn't in what you spend, but in the depth of presence you offer. When you show up as a centered man, without needing to prove or persuade, that's a timeless magnetism money can never replicate. Money, when used to reflect a responsible and grounded lifestyle, can be an asset. But when placed at the center, when it defines worth, becomes the core of attraction, and shapes the relationship's identity, then essential values like integrity, depth, and purpose fade into the background, if not vanish entirely. A man who constantly references his financial strength, who makes wealth a central part of every interaction, becomes known not by who he is, but by what he owns. Others won't remember how he lived, how he thought, or what he stood for, but only how much he had. It's a flattening of the self, where empathy, critical thought, discipline, and meaning fall out of focus. When a man emphasizes money in communication, young women often come to define the relationship through transactional expectations. This isn't necessarily because of greed, but because of the frame he established. If the relationship starts as a material exchange, it is only natural for her to respond accordingly. But this interaction lacks endurance. When money becomes the axis, the man is no longer a person, but a provider role in a transactional system. Attraction, then, isn't about who he is, but what function he serves. And because money is external, subject to change or loss, so too is any connection built on it. The bond becomes unstable, fragile, and emotionally hollow. From the Stoic lens, placing money at the heart of life or relationship is not just morally misaligned, it is self-devaluing. Stoicism teaches that our core duty is to cultivate arete, virtue, excellence of character and soul. Wealth, fame, and status are beyond our full control, and therefore cannot define identity or determine real worth. A man guided by inner principle, with his own values, purpose, and integrity, lets these speak naturally through his words, actions, and decisions. He need not flaunt wealth to prove anything. The strength of self-command says more than any display. Conversely, the man who places money first becomes dependent on others' opinions and easily loses himself when his fortune fluctuates. Moreover, when money becomes a means of control or influence, trust begins to erode. The man struggles to distinguish genuine connection from material expectation. This fosters chronic doubt, undermining emotional openness and the vulnerability needed for real intimacy, the core of any lasting relationship. Thus, defining your worth by money not only distorts how others see you, it also clouds enduring, irreplaceable traits like integrity, psychological depth, and a purposeful life. Without these, no amount of wealth can sustain genuine attraction. 4. Turning yourself into a mentor. She doesn't need a teacher. She needs a man who knows how to be present, In interactions between older men and younger women, giving advice is often seen as a sign of care, responsibility, and life experience. Many men believe that, having lived through more, they can help younger women avoid mistakes and find better direction in life, career, or relationships. Yet despite good intentions, this behavior often carries an overlooked consequence. It shifts the relationship from a peer connection to a hierarchical dynamic, where the man becomes the teacher and the woman the student. This imbalance directly impacts the emotional current and romantic energy, both central to male-female relationships. In most romantic connections, attraction doesn't arise from guidance, but from parity, a space where both parties can express themselves and be seen as individuals with unique worth. When a man constantly offers advice, even when unsolicited, he unintentionally dominates the interaction, making the woman feel observed, judged, or directed rather than understood. In social communication, advice is not just about content, it's about positioning. The one giving advice occupies the space of the one who knows, while the recipient is implicitly someone who needs fixing. In romantic relationships, this structure blurs the sense of being accepted and respected, both crucial emotional elements that sustain attraction. When a woman feels constantly corrected, she begins to shrink her emotional expression, leading to discomfort and loss of authenticity. Attraction wanes. The connection grows stiff and emotionally shallow. Behaviorally, this constant advising reflects a subtle pattern of control. The man may believe he's being supportive, but in reality, he's imposing his personal standard on someone else, expecting her to change in the direction he deems right. Yet at the heart of any romantic relationship lies not the need to be corrected, but to be seen, to be fully present, and to be accepted as one is. From a Stoic perspective, this behavior reveals a misalignment in inner governance. Stoicism teaches mastery of the self, not control over others. A Stoic cultivates calm, recognizes the limits of his influence, and distinguishes what he can control from what he cannot, chief among which are the behavior, choices, and path of another. The habit of frequent advice-giving suggests that the man has yet to fully accept the other's autonomy or trust that she can find her own way. Another consequence is the erosion of emotional presence. Advice focuses on analysis, solutions, and concrete actions, while romantic attraction requires listening, non-judgmental sharing, and calm presence. A man may offer sound solutions, but without emotional connection, his words feel cold, distant, even condescending. When a woman shares her worry and receives logic instead of empathy, she feels no connection, no matter how accurate the advice. As a result, even with good intent, the man becomes emotionally distant, less a partner and more a life consultant. Yet what younger women often seek in older men is not a guide, but someone present, grounded, understanding, and non-controlling. Romantic attraction does not thrive in hierarchy, but in unspoken resonance between two equals, regardless of age or experience. In this dynamic between older men and younger women, a common pattern is the man seeking to validate his value through insight, life perspective, and direction. With years of experience, he may view sharing knowledge as proof of maturity and reliability. But when knowledge becomes the primary mode of interaction, he unintentionally suppresses two core sources of romantic appeal: vitality and presence. Vitality is not loudness or youthful energy. It radiates from someone who knows why he lives, feels deeply, and connects sincerely with the present moment. It is the aura of someone truly here, not distracted by outcomes, not trying to steer the conversation, not striving to impress. Presence is the ability to hold full attention on another without being pulled into mental chatter or emotional reactivity. When a man replaces this with constant advice-giving, he enters analytical mode, where reason dominates, but emotion is abandoned. During interaction, a woman doesn't just hear your words, she senses your energy. When a man is busy sharing opinions, explaining logic, or demonstrating superior understanding, he may make an intellectual impression, but he forfeits emotional connection. The problem isn't the accuracy of his ideas, but the absence of emotional space, where the other person feels seen, heard, and not turned into a project. From a social psychological lens, people have a basic need to be acknowledged as they are, not endlessly corrected. When a woman speaks about her experience, emotions, or personal struggles, she often isn't seeking solutions, but emotional companionship. When the man quickly switches to analysis and offers fixes, she feels processed rather than understood. Emotional attraction, built on safety, trust, and honest presence, is thus fractured. From a Stoic lens, this reveals an imbalance in the use of reason. While Stoicism champions logic and virtuous action, it does not support using intellect as a means to dominate or direct others. A Stoic focuses on self-mastery, not using knowledge to manipulate another's emotions or choices. He learns to be quietly present, to observe without judgment, and to act only when necessary, guided by principle, not impulse. In romance, a man becomes compelling not because he explains everything correctly, but because he is solid in his presence, needing nothing to prove. A man who knows when to stay silent, when to share, and when to simply sit beside her without speaking, often leaves a deeper mark than one who speaks fluently, yet creates no emotional harmony. When a man anchors his identity in knowledge and guidance, he may win arguments, but he loses the chance to be felt. And feeling, not fact, is the core of lasting connection. The allure lies not in how much he says, but in how she feels when she's near him. If a man can balance insight with intentional silence, truth with timely presence, then his magnetism stops being a skill and becomes the natural expression of inner strength. 5. Trying to appear younger. The more you try to be someone else, the more you lose yourself and real attraction. In today's dating culture, where generational lines blur under technology and internet trends, many older men feel pressure to keep up so as not to appear outdated. Especially when engaging younger women, they often adjust their image to feel more relatable. These adjustments can include youthful fashion, internet slang, up-to-date music tastes, or even altering their communication style to mimic the attitudes of younger generations. While the goal is to blend in, the result is often counterproductive. When someone imitates a culture that is not their own, the effort comes off as strained and inauthentic. Young women can easily detect the disconnect between appearance and the man's inner energy. This misalignment erodes the authenticity of the interaction, diminishing attraction, which stems not from similarity, but from the strength of identity. From a social behavior standpoint, mimicking another age group is a psychological defense mechanism, a response to feeling out of place or at a disadvantage. Ironically, as men attempt to youthify themselves to seem more appealing, they obscure the very traits that naturally set them apart: experience, emotional composure, and a worldview refined by time. By reshaping himself to resemble youth, a man blurs the generational contrast that could have been his advantage. This unintentionally erases the magnetic tension of opposites, a powerful psychological force in male-female dynamics. Attraction doesn't arise solely from similarity, but from contrast and balance between two distinct temperaments. An older man is compelling, not because he mirrors the young, but because he doesn't. He's a slower, steadier, and more contemplative. To chase youth is to abandon the very essence that sets him apart. Moreover, this imitation of youth rarely holds. A man may dress fashionably, speak in slang, or echo trending views, but if these aren't authentic parts of him, they reveal themselves as tactics, not personality. Once the outer image clashes with the inner self, trust falters. The woman begins to question who he really is. This lack of coherence undermines emotional depth and destabilizes the relationship. From a Stoic perspective, trying to resemble someone else for approval reveals a flawed perception of self-worth. Stoicism teaches us to live in accordance with our nature, unshaken by external validation, and to reject altering our essence for acceptance. A Stoic does not adapt to fit others. He stands firm in who he is, building connections only with those who accept that. True freedom lies not in being liked, but in living honestly without needing affirmation. Within that framework, the more a man remains faithful to his values, his way of life, his voice, his worldview, the more enduring his appeal becomes. Lasting attraction comes not from sameness, but from authentic difference. When someone knows who he is, holds his ground, and refuses to bend for approval, that unshakable stance becomes a source of deep magnetism, far stronger than fleeting attempts at youthfulness. In modern society, age is often viewed as a liability, especially in relationships between older men and younger women. This leads many men to obscure or deny their true age, not just with words, but through behavior, image, and demeanor. Yet in rejecting the stage of life they're in, they also discard everything that stage has earned: psychological depth, lived experience, and inner steadiness. Age, in essence, is not just a count of years, but evidence of what one has seen and overcome. It bears witness to lessons learned through failure, relationships matured, and mistakes that yielded hard-earned wisdom. To deny age is to deny the very elements only time can offer: patience, emotional regulation, long-range thinking, and spiritual maturity. Qualities no 20-something can possess, no matter their intelligence or social finesse. Behaviorally, denying age shows up in avoiding conversations about life stages, anxiety about being compared to younger men, or adopting a look and tone meant to seem not too old. These are not simply signs of fearing lost attractiveness. They're symptoms of identity instability. A man unwilling to embrace his true age reveals that he has lost trust in the value that age inherently holds. When interacting with younger women, hiding or rejecting age doesn't erase generational difference. It deepens the sense of artificiality. A woman may be drawn to maturity, but she cannot build trust or intimacy with someone who isn't honest with himself. True attraction is built not on surface traits, but on presence, honest, whole, and unapologetic, in both strengths and limitations. According to Stoicism, Things outside our control, such as time and aging, must be accepted as part of life's natural rhythm. A Stoic doesn't cling to youth or deny aging, because he understands that value lies not in appearance, but in how time has been used to cultivate virtue and self-mastery. To conceal one's age is to cling to illusions, to desire control over the uncontrollable. And this is an emotional imbalance Stoicism seeks to correct. Beyond that, age grants a sense of groundedness that others can feel. A man may lack youthful looks, but if he exudes calm, stability, and has nothing to prove, then it is that serenity that sets him apart. What the young often lack is rootedness. What the older man can and should offer is steadiness, guidance, and a presence unshaken by surface storms. These qualities only emerge when a man no longer hides from his age. Therefore, to deny one's age is to reject the unique strength that age brings. Lasting appeal doesn't come from imitating the young. It comes from proudly embodying who you are at this precise point in life. A man honest about his age draws others in with sincerity, depth, stability, and a life seasoned by time. Gifts no youth, however charming, can replicate. 6. Overemphasizing achievements. You are not a résumé. You are a man of depth. In conversations between older men and younger women, there is a common tendency for the man to use personal accomplishments as a way to make a strong first impression. This often stems from the belief that when the age gap is wide, attraction should not rely on appearance or youthful energy, but be compensated by career success, wealth, or social prestige. As a result, many choose to speak about their achievements as a means of asserting value. However, when personal stories revolve solely around career milestones, accumulated assets, or influential connections, the dialogue gradually turns into a monologue, where the speaker dominates and the listener becomes a passive audience. From a communication standpoint, a meaningful conversation is defined by mutual exchange, where both sides participate, listen, and respond. Each person should feel seen, heard, and respected. When one side monopolizes the space, especially by boasting or delivering long narratives about accomplishments, this balance is quickly broken. The conversation ceases to be a shared emotional bridge and becomes a personal platform controlled by one speaker. This imbalance is particularly damaging in romantic contexts, where emotional connection is central. Young women often seek genuine presence, emotional resonance, and equal space to share. When a man devotes too much time to recounting his accomplishments, the space for her expression shrinks. She may feel overshadowed, excluded from the conversation's flow. Rather than feeling heard or understood, she may feel like she's attending a lecture on someone else's success, without having a role in the dialogue. From a behavioral perspective, the constant highlighting of achievements often signals an underlying need for external validation. This doesn't always stem from insecurity, but from the belief that one must prove their worth, especially when standing next to someone younger, livelier. Yet this urge to prove oneself creates emotional instability and detachment from the present. Instead of listening or connecting, the man is operating in defensive mode, using facts and credentials as armor. From the Stoic lens, a man's true value lies not in what he has accomplished, but in how he conducts himself in the present. Achievements, while worthy of respect, are external. They lie outside our full control, and should not form the sole foundation of our self-worth. A Stoic cultivates self-command, inner stillness, and solid character in every interaction rather than dwelling on past victories. Another consequence is that conversations overloaded with "what I've done" tend to dull the other person's curiosity. Rather than inviting deeper exploration, it can create the impression that everything worth knowing has already been said, leaving no mystery, no room to discover more. This erodes long-term appeal, especially in relationships that thrive on slow unfolding and quiet revelations. In short, there's nothing wrong with sharing your achievements, but when they dominate the conversation, they risk sabotaging connection, undermining authenticity, and creating imbalance. The true weight of a conversation lies not in what is said, but in the feeling it leaves behind, the sense of being present, seen, and accompanied. In the journey of building a relationship, especially between an older man and a younger woman, expressing oneself is essential. But when a man makes his accomplishments the central metric of his worth, the foundation of attraction can drift away from what truly nurtures emotional connection. Achievements, be they titles, assets, degrees, or social influence, may impress at first. But if a man relies solely on them as his ticket to approval, the attraction becomes horizontal, built on data, accolades, and storytelling, rather than vertical, rooted in presence, emotion, and empathy. When a man defines himself by what he's done, he often slides into a performative communication mode. In this mode, he's no longer fully present, but a spokesperson for past milestones, titles, and trophies. This might inspire momentary admiration, but it makes emotional connection elusive. A lasting relationship is not built on the spiker audience or achiever-admirer model, but on resonance, understanding, and mutual inner world sharing. Psychologically, emotional attraction arises from invisible traits like listening, emotional intelligence, peaceful presence, and grounded energy. These are not found on a resume, but they form the bedrock of trust, safety, and genuine interest. When a man places excessive weight on external success as a means of drawing others in, he may overlook the subtler expressions, the ones the other person actually feels and is drawn to. From the Stoic perspective, true human value is not rooted in social recognition or personal success, but in how one manages their inner life and lives by virtue. According to this philosophy, external things, fame, wealth, titles, are outside our control and therefore unfit as the foundation of our stability or joy. A man who builds his self-worth on them is vulnerable to change and may lose direction once there's nothing left to present. Stoicism teaches that lasting attraction stems from inner strength, from living in harmony with one's chosen values, not from seeking validation through others' approval. Another consequence is that when a man fixates on showcasing accomplishments, the woman may feel subtly compared or appraised. In such situations, she may begin to wonder, is he connecting with me for who I am, or for my admiration of who he is? This doubt undermines emotional safety, making it harder for her to open up naturally. It also creates pressure, where she may feel she has to measure up to a success resume rather than simply be herself. Emotional attraction, unlike admiration, requires a space where both people can step out of their social roles and be present as real human beings, with strengths, flaws, and imperfection. When a man recognizes this and loosens his grip on the resume as a social tool, He creates space for authenticity to emerge, the very thing all deep relationships are built upon. 7. Neglecting appearance and health. When you abandon your body, you abandon your presence. Appearance is not the sole element of one's attractiveness, but it is the first thing others perceive. In any relationship, especially between an older man and a younger woman, appearance is not merely aesthetic. It reflects how a man sees and treats himself. When a man neglects his appearance, dressing sloppily, ignoring basic grooming, or failing to invest in his personal image, he sends a clear message: I no longer consider myself a priority. This does not mean he must wear expensive clothes, follow fashion trends, or hide his age. On the contrary, the allure of a mature man lies in knowing who he is and expressing it through a style that matches his character and stage of life. Neatness, cleanliness, a steady posture, and a confident gaze. These are simple yet powerful ingredients in creating a first impression. When they are dismissed or devalued, he not only loses an opportunity to attract, but also invites doubts about his self-management and personal dignity. From a behavioral standpoint, appearance serves as a silent signal of one's approach to life. A man who dresses carelessly, with disheveled hair and sluggish movements, may not say outright that he has given up on himself, but that is the impression his image creates. In the eyes of others, especially younger women, these signals are unconsciously absorbed and quickly become the input data by which his attractiveness and reliability are judged. Even in today's world of broader body acceptance, personal presentation remains a basic sign of self-respect and maturity in face-to-face interaction. When a man shows up without investing appropriately in his appearance, it often points to a deeper loss of life force. In many cases, physical decline reflects an internal fatigue, resignation, or abandonment of personal responsibility. To stop caring about one's appearance is to stop caring about how one exists in the world, and more deeply, to withdraw from one's role in relationships. This creates an image that is vague, lifeless, and lacking in direction, exactly the opposite of the energy others seek in a companion. From the Stoic perspective, appearance may not be the highest good, but it is within our control. Stoicism does not promote vanity or artificiality, but it upholds purposeful living, discipline, and the refusal to surrender any domain of life to disorder. One cannot claim to be mastering life if even the most visible daily expression of the self, his outward presence, is neglected. The body, clothing, and demeanor are not there to impress temporarily, but to declare that one lives with awareness and integrity. In this sense, appearance is not a competition of beauty, but a reflection of inner values. A man who knows who he is, where he stands in life, and maintains his image naturally, not for display, not to impress, is signaling most clearly that he possesses self-mastery and trustworthiness. In the eyes of a woman, especially one seeking depth, this is the mark of a man who does not chase validation, yet does not abandon himself either. Physical health is the foundation of all life activity, not only biologically, but emotionally, mentally, and socially. As a man enters middle or later age, natural physical decline is inevitable. But what matters is not aging itself, it's how he responds to it. Neglecting health through poor diet, inactivity, substance abuse, or erratic sleep affects more than just the body. It signals a refusal to live deliberately and with quality in the most mature phase of life. When health is disregarded, negative consequences soon appear and ripple into every other aspect of life. A fatigued body dulls the mind. Physical rigidity leads to emotional sluggishness, and the inability to control daily habits weakens both confidence and autonomy. In relationships, especially with younger women, this creates an impression of fragility and detachment, far from the image of a grounded, capable, and resilient man. Health is not a momentary condition, but the cumulative result of one's lifestyle. A man who cares for his health understands that the body is not just for survival, but also a medium for communicating one's orientation toward life. An older man doesn't need to be muscular or agile as in youth, but he can maintain functional strength, a solid immune system, and a steady energy, all of which broadcast stability, control, and long-term partnership potential. Socially, those in good physical shape are often seen as dependable, disciplined, and self-governing. In personal relationships, especially when an older man is with a younger woman, health is no longer just personal. It directly impacts the quality of interaction. A man who is constantly tired, distracted, or emotionally worn out will struggle to stay fully present, an essential ingredient for emotional connection and lasting attraction. Through the Stoic lens, health lies within the realm of what we can control, and thus must be managed with reason. A Stoic man does not surrender his body to entropy. He maintains it through discipline, moderation, and self-command. A healthy body enables swift action and reflects a mind that is ordered and a life that is purposeful. To let the body decline is not a sign of freedom, but of surrender to unconscious habits and stagnant emotions. Moreover, taking care of one's health in later life is an act of respect toward oneself and one's partner. When a man invests in his body and remains alert, he sends the message, "I am still here, fully, wholly, and ready to walk beside someone in a healthy way." In a woman's eyes, this reflects not just physical attractiveness, but the presence of a man who is reliable, who has not abandoned himself or resigned to drift through life passively. In the end, neglecting one's health is a form of refusal, a refusal to live in alignment with personal values, to show up fully in relationships, and to express strength clearly during a phase of life that demands balance most. Conversely, maintaining health is not just physical preservation. It is the foundation for living with dignity, depth, and true magnetism. I understand well the feeling of a man who has moved past his youth, when appearance is no longer a highlight, when no one seems to ask about your list of achievements anymore, and when the presence of younger people easily makes you question yourself. But it is precisely in those moments that Stoicism becomes a compass for the inner life. This philosophy doesn't teach us to harden ourselves or pretend not to care. It reminds us that whatever lies within our control must be done well each day. From holding our posture upright, to exercising regularly, to speaking with simplicity and weight. Instead of trying to look younger to fit in, I learned to clarify my identity, not through words, but by living with principle. I stopped talking about what I had accomplished in the past and began asking whether I was living in alignment with what I claimed to believe today. When I no longer saw women as targets to impress, but as people to understand, every relationship became lighter, more honest. When I took care of my health, not to show off my body, but to stay clear-headed each morning. I found myself living proactively, rather than just reacting to circumstances. And above all, I no longer asked, "Am I still attractive?" But instead, "Am I the kind of man I respect?" Because in silence, that is the only question that truly matters. If this message resonated with you in any way, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future reflections. Not to escape the world, but to learn how to stand firmly within it. Because in the end, the most attractive man is not the one most admired by others, but the one who has learned to admire himself quietly. See you in the next video.